Welcome, everyone. We've got a few of us here, so I thought maybe we would. Really, it's going to be conversational. That's what I'd like to do. So let me just sort of. There's a few of us here. Maybe I can give you guys a bit of an overview, but I'd rather lead with some of your questions. So I think we did this in. This might be in webinar format. So if you have questions, please go ahead and submit them, and you can do them on the.
Hey, Brad. Brad, what we could do is we could promote them to be panelists. Then we'd be able to see people.
Say again, sorry.
We could promote the 4 people that are there to be panelists, and they'd be able to contribute.
Okay. Yeah, I guess if you guys want to be able to contribute sort of verbally, that'd be great. I'd like that, but some of you may want to stay anonymous, so it's up to you. Is there a way to maybe have them raise their hand or something using the raise the hand
Yeah,
button?
just raise their hand and then I'll promote them.
Okay. Some people just want to listen in, which is fine too. So that's all good. Well, let me just start with saying, that the good news is that there's a lot of vaccinations happening in the Bay Area. And over 70% of folks in San Francisco and in Marin County are well on their way to being doubly vaccinated. So that's great. Nationally, it's a little bit more of a problem, as you guys know. And so that's one part of it is how many people are vaccinated and how safe are we? The other part of the conversation really is around how safe are we? And just how do we socially engage and how do we interact? So I thought I'd spend a little bit of time talking about that. But I really encourage you guys to please send me ideas and thoughts that that you think are relevant to talk about. So with respect to the safety, if you're with other people, I've had a lot of questions about if you're with someone that's vaccinated, can you be indoors? Do you need to wear a mask? And if you're vaccinated and the people you're with are vaccinated, then you can act like you did before COVID was here, because the odds of you being at risk for getting infected are quite remote. And the 3 variables to put into play really about that are, and I need to see, I think, isn't there the ability, I'm not sure if there's the ability to actually do some sketching on here, but if you do, there's 3 elements. So one is, what's the prevalence in the environment that you're in of COVID? And for example, here in Marin and in San Francisco, it's quite low. And then the second is, what's the chances of you getting it if you were exposed? And then what's the chance of you giving it to someone else, right? So if I'm sitting if I have friends over and they're all vaccinated, so the chance of me getting it if my friend is sick with it is, in theory, 5%. Although I think it's actually less. These studies haven't been done because they've never really looked at the risk of transmission of someone who's sick, who's been vaccinated, giving it to someone else. There's some studies looking at risk of transmission amongst healthcare workers that have been vaccinated, and it shows it's quite remote, really low. I think it was 1 in 400. But let's pretend it's 5%. So you have, which it isn't, but let's just pretend. So it's 1 in 20 chance that I get it from my friend. It's a 1 in 20 chance that friend got it from somebody who's known to be infected. And what's the chance of that person, initially the source, carrying it in the first place as they walk through? It's really, it's far below 1% prevalence in the Bay Area. So if you do the math on that, 1% times 5% times 5%, you end up with, I think it's 1 in 40,000, I think. So 1% is 1 in 100 times 1 in 20. Now you're at 1 in 2,000. And then you multiply that times 20 again. So yeah, you get 1 in 40,000. So it's a really rare event. So vaccinated with vaccinated, super comfortable, hugging, sharing food together. There's no issues. I mean, you may get a cold or other things that people have, but again, and you should behave accordingly. But then the question is, what do you do in mixed company? And in mixed company, again, we're in a better place because the prevalence is low, but in mixed company, meaning you don't know if they're vaccinated or they aren't vaccinated, then you have to have a little bit more precautions. Again, the event's rare because if someone's unvaccinated, what's the odds of them having it at that given point in time are super low. Let's say it's 1%, which it's not. And then you getting it from them. But, it is a 1-0 phenomenon, right? So meaning that it's not a probability when someone has it. They either do or they don't. It's 1 or a 0. But at a population level, people that you hang out with, what's the odds of them having it depends on what their travel schedule, their views politically on whether or not they believe the science, which unfortunately has become politicized, in those sorts of variables. So if you're going to play it safe, and the next step beyond that is, what about going out into restaurants? Can I be indoor in a restaurant? Can I be outdoor in a restaurant? And again, these are all the similar sorts of conversations. So being outdoors, pretty safe. Vaccinated outdoors, you're vaccinated, sitting outdoors, dining, I don't see a problem. Being indoors is a super low probability event also, but you do want to keep in mind a few factors. So you want to keep in mind, when you're thinking about being an indoor space, you want to keep in mind ventilation, spacing, and masking. So ventilation being the big one. So if you're in an indoor environment, ideally there's good ventilation, meaning that one side of the building has open windows or doors, and the other side of the building has open windows or doors. And that way you get cross ventilation where fresh air is coming in and leaving. Having a fan turned on inside a closed room doesn't do anything except move the air around. That's maybe contaminated. So that's not helpful. If there's HEPA filters in place, then moving the air around is helpful because it'll move it into a HEPA filter where it'll filter out the virus and other particulate matter, and then create fresh air. So those are really the main things to keep in mind. And masking indoors while you're eating is just silly, right? Because people don't do it. So I wouldn't even think about how helpful a mask is when you go indoors, because people take them off immediately. They rarely put them back on. So it's really about ventilation. And even outdoors, depending on what the quote outdoors dining environments like, it can be poor ventilation. So I would keep that all in mind. And then travel, people are starting to travel. And the factors relating to travel really have to do with really two pieces that I can think of. One is the destination where you're going to, and just to be mindful if you're going to a hot spot, a place that isn't well regulated, then you're changing that prevalence factor I was alluding to in the beginning. So even though the risk is low, it's not 0. And so if you surround yourself in a high prevalence area, it increases your risks. Still remote, but possible. And then travel while you're on the plane. So planes are really safe. They dump the air out repeatedly with these HEPA filters in place where they suck air out. It goes, I believe it's down and out, and through a HEPA filter system, and then fresh air comes in at a 50% filtration rate, at least 5 times an hour. So there's quick turnover of air inside the cabin. The biggest factor is really transport, getting yourself into the plane. So all that happens to get you from your home and all the transportation you do and different things you contact and people that you come into contact with to eventually end up in your seat. That's really where the risk is to be thinking about when you're traveling, assuming you're flying commercial. So travel, dining, how do you feel about going into movie theaters? Unless I don't feel comfortable going to movie theaters because I don't understand, and I don't think they've been super transparent about the ventilation systems in the movie theaters. If there is more transparency about those that you're aware of, then great. If they're really, talking about explicitly what they're doing. Those are the main events. Any other things that come up for anyone else want to mention around sort of social interactions? Going to parties, et cetera, and things like that. Again, if people are either vaccinated or tested. That's what I would do before feeling comfortable going to an event, a large event. So some people aren't being vaccinated because for their own reasons, in which case those people should be tested with either the with a molecular technology, not the antigen testing, the rapid antigen testing. But maybe we should talk about testing for a moment. The rapid antigen testing is not very good. It's good for a population that you repeatedly test at the population level. Well, at the individual level, it's not good at all, because the chances, the false negative rate is at least 10% at best, and all the way to 50%. So it's 10% in ideal circumstances when you're actually infectious right now, then it still has a 10% chance of missing it. And then there's the time when you're have viral particles in you, but you're not quite fully infectious. And it totally misses that. Whereas PCR will pick that all up. So the bucket of molecular testing, just to sort of educate you about that, antigen testing looks for the antigen, the virus, and doesn't amplify it, right? The PCR testing actually will amplify the signal of the viral particles. And so you can have just a small number and it'll pick it up. That's the state of the art. And that's the machine that fortunately we were able to purchase back in December and have been using. There's a new technology out also that's molecular based, like PCR. It's called LAMP technology. And that technology is almost as good as PCR, but not as good, but almost. It's pretty good. You know, the full studies, they're saying 95, 96, 97%, maybe 98. I haven't seen the large studies, but that's what the company's saying. And PCR is considered 99%. That's against the PCR as the gold standard. So that's comparing against that. Whereas antigen, like I said, is 50 to at best 90%. So this LAMP technology is a home kit that you can do, that we have them if you're interested in them. They're cheaper than the cost of the PCR machine and the cartridge that comes with it. So it's not quite as good, but it's good. And you can do it at home. So and you self-swab, there's instructions on it. It's a battery operated little device. It's, about that big, maybe, 2 by 4 inches by an inch tall. And it has lights on it. And you put the batteries in, you put a swab in your nose, you put it into this little container, and then you drop the container inside a slot, and then it cooks, and then it blinks. And then when it's ready, it stops blinking, it says ready, and it gives you a light that says positive or negative. It's very straightforward. So that's another way for testing if people are going to bring a gathering together and there's people that aren't vaccinated. Those are the recommendations. So those are the social pieces. The United States is doing well. As you know, internationally, it's a bit more complicated. I just got off the phone with a friend who lives in Switzerland earlier today. We were talking, and he said actually they're doing better. Not everyone's vaccinated. He's a physician. He's just going to be finished getting vaccinated now, so they were definitely slower. But he said things are, relatively okay. So, but he's not sure how things are going to be in the next couple months. Whereas, as you know, India and Mexico, Central America, South America, particularly Brazil, is really not doing well at all. So the problem with that is variants. Maybe we can talk a little bit about variants. The good news is, so far, all the variants that have been circulating widely into the United States, which I wouldn't even call them widely, but have come to the United States, which is there's a California variant, there's a New York variant, there's a UK variant, and it's better to talk about these with their associated numbers, but I think for ease, we'll just talk about these by origin of where they sort of were most prevalent, because apparently the UK variant actually didn't come from the UK originally, but it really became prevalent there. And the Brazilian variant, those are all found to be quite penetrable by the vaccine. So the vaccine is shown to be quite effective against all those variants, which is great news. We were concerned about the South African variant in particular, and the Brazilian variant. And it seems that the mRNA vaccine, at least, is the one that's been studied and looked at, is quite effective. So that's great. The ones coming out of India, we don't know, and what variants may come out of India and elsewhere. And for that matter, from within the United States, because people are resisting getting the vaccine, and so those people will get infected in the United States. Those people that aren't willing to get vaccinated will then get infected, some portion of them, and then cause more variants, which cause more big problems for the population at large. So even though it isn't, people feel it's an individual decision whether they get to choose to be vaccinated or not, they are leading to more variants being created, which then will lead to more death because our vaccines may not cover that, and then more people will die. But overall, I'm saying that just to say, if you know people that choose not to get vaccinated, please feel free to share that perspective because it's an important one. It's an individual decision, but it also that individual decision that affects their friends, loved ones, and population at large. So that's the good news about the variants and our vaccine effectiveness. They still, anticipate we will need boosters. So whether it's 12 months from now or 18 months from now, it's unclear. The most recent data shows we have a really robust antibody response, even 6-8 months out from the vaccinations, which is great to hear. So that's been really promising because I think it was 6 months out, the latest data. That robust of an antibody response suggests that we'll probably have good coverage, antibody coverage, forget about the variants for a moment, but just a good antibody response, sustained antibody response, a year, hopefully 18 months, and maybe longer, yet to be determined. And then the question is, the other good news is the variants, like I said, are covered by the vaccine, and the mutation rate is pretty slow, which is good because that means it's much more likely that we'll be able to be covered by the original vaccine that we received for longer. But it is thought that a booster shot will be, they are making them now, they're researching what to do. It's a combination of like the flu where you're trying to anticipate future mutations by looking at what's out there and what's mutating. So you're trying to anticipate and whether that'll be delivered to us this fall, next winter, the following spring, it's a little unclear. Things are doing better than we anticipated. So initially we were concerned that we'd have to get vaccine out by the fall, booster vaccines out by the fall. Doesn't look that way. Looks like things are going better than we had hoped. So that's good. But no doubt we will need boosters. And the question, how often? Is it an annual thing? Is it every 2 or 3 years? It's a little bit unclear right now. What else for conversation? There are a couple questions. I'll pull up the chat. Please feel free to add other ones in there if you can. What about the booster shot, which I think we just covered? It's not out yet. It will be at some point. I know Moderna and Pfizer are both working on theirs, and I'm sure the other companies are as well. What is the exposure risk around young adults? So, yeah, that's a good question. And it's low, but definitely it depends on the population. It depends on the location. There's lots of sporting events going on these days. For example, like kids in water polo, and they're trying to limit the pool deck to one parent only, for example, on the deck. So try and limit gatherings and crowds. But the risk right now is in that population. So as you know, they're trying to get FDA to, the FDA is reviewing the data, I guess, or extrapolations of data to look at children under 16. It's been approved for people 16 and over. And in San Francisco and Marin County, they really had a big push about that. So I know like my son and a lot of those athletes are really pushed to go get vaccinated so you can play sports, and easier and et cetera. So there's a big push in the 16 to 18-year-old age group. And the thought is in the next month or so, there's going to be a big push in the younger age group as well, assuming it's safe. I was trying to hold off, to be honest, but my kids, my wife and son went back east to look at colleges, and they were on the plane. The planes are packed right now. There's no longer spacing between passengers. They have decided that that's no longer necessary, for better and mostly worse. So, there's my son unvaccinated sitting next to all sorts of people. So at that juncture, we decided it's probably better getting vaccinated, and he did fine so far. But there is, like, sort of this, to your point of that question, is there is a reservoir of risk there in the whole unvaccinated group. That's, age 0 to 16. And in that group, there's promising news. One is it's not super infectious and transmissible in that group, at least the data that I've seen so far. There's been very few, if you look at the data related to reopening and returning back to school, there was 0 events in the first 1 million school days of transmission from student to teacher. There were, and I think it was like 900,000 school days. There were, I believe, 9 or 11 cases. One was a teacher to 2 students, and the rest were sort of student to student. And 0 went from student to teacher. So the thought is that, the transmissibility is a bit low, and secondarily peer-to-peer, and then very remote from student to teacher. Any other questions? So I would say the other piece then this worth discussing is just how do we get back to our a new version of our life, interacting with people. And we sort of went through all the technical parts of the probabilities of getting infected and things like that, but how about just living our life again? And there's this huge push, everyone is wanting to travel and wanting to get out of the incubator that they've been in, understandably. And I would just encourage you to be mindful about the sort of intensity with which you get out there, because there's definitely folks that are really trying to break loose and bust loose, and there's going to be a lot of travel, a lot of intensity. And I think it's an opportunity to be mindful about who you want to spend time with and how you want to spend your time. Just be a bit more deliberate. It's really a rare opportunity for us to choose. It's rare that we get to pause and then resume. And so that ability to resume gives us choice. And that choice can be as fleeting or as long as you allow it to be. So if you just snap back into your routine without being mindful and deliberate, there is no choice. There'll be very little choice. You'll be back in it. Next thing you know, you'll be on that hamstring wheel going Mach 3. But if you try and be intentional about it, I think you might, find yourself making choices that you're happy about, whether it's certain people you don't want to spend time with anymore, or certain people you do want to spend more time with, whether it's how you re-engineer your work and your cadence of your day and where you're working from home, working part-time in the workplace, how much you're going to travel again, if you need to travel for work or not. All these pieces are wide open, and I should share with you, there's lots of companies, a lot of patients that run companies I've been in conversation with, and other companies that I've just consulted for in other areas. There's a lot of conversation, and it's the full spectrum, where some companies are going completely back to how it used to be, and some companies are completely unwinding their commercial real estate commitments and mandating people work from home. And then there's folks in between that are sort of reorganizing the workplace and reorganizing the cubicles and shared workspaces, and having people have shared workspaces so they come in 2 or 3 days a week. And so there's wide open opportunities. It's a white canvas here. And I really think that because it's a white canvas, and nothing is really correct or true, a truism, that you should feel comfortable being vocal and explicit about what you feel is right, because there's no right answer. It's what you want to create for yourself. So whether you do that professionally and or personally, I encourage you to do so. And to pace yourself and to try and insert a bit of a meditation or a yoga practice or a Tai Chi practice every day, even for just 10 minutes into your life. I'll give you 2 books that I've been sort of in the midst of that I encourage you to consider. One is by someone named Pema Chodron, Pemachhodron, who's a Buddhist monk. And she has it's a book, I listened to it on Audible, called Making Friends with Your Mind. And it was really like a weekend, I think, retreat that they recorded, turned into a book. And it's a great book to listen to. Great conversations, great questions being asked. For those that experience, chronic pain, great book, especially the back part of it. For those that there's a myriad of there's certain people that came up and asked questions that were just poignant on every sort of walk of life. So I highly encourage you to consider that one. There's, for those of you that are sort of interested in behavior change and understanding that, there's an older book called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. And I think that's an excellent book as well. I can put that in the chat. So Pema Chodron, Making Friends, is the main one I would suggest. For those that want some help with meditation, let me give you some tools. So there's a few. There's a course that I'm just finishing up called Waking Up by Sam Harris. And it's an app, and there's a course with it. Many of you know some other apps. The nice thing about that Waking Up course is that it's really well designed, that it has about 8 to 12 minutes every day for 28 days. And there's a whole bunch of other content. There's poems written, there's poetry by David White, who's a well-known poet, very provocative poet. There's someone else reads a whole bunch of koans. There's just a range of different material there. Of course, for just straight up meditation, many of you heard of these different apps, so I'll just put them in here in case you haven't heard of them. And the last one is by Tarika Lovegarden, who I think I've mentioned before, is running a group meditation, as well as does one-on-one meditations. And so she's been great. She's worked with several patients here. She teaches a course at Stanford, and she does great work, works at Cavallo Point, and really, I highly recommend her. She has an app as well called Love Garden Meditations. So there's a range of apps, and I would be, as we ran, I think it's a good opportunity to engage in some of this work here. So some contemplative practices. Listening to that book by Pema Chodron, doing the course or doing some meditation, it really allows you to give yourself a little bit of distance between where you are now and where you want to get to. So work toward the aspired self. So I think that's all I wanted to cover today, but if either of you have any questions, please put them in before we close. All right, well, thanks for everyone's time. Glad this was helpful, and look forward to the next one. We'll put this up on the YouTube channel because other folks that couldn't make it, we'll put it there for them. and you enjoy the rest of your week. Take good care. Bye-bye.